Greetings everybody. I am Dr. Mudassir, Assistant Professor of Physiology, and today I am going to explain about regulation of respiration. So before moving on to the topic proper, let us understand what are the specific learning objectives of today's class. At the end of the class, the undergraduate student should be able to understand how breathing is regulated, enlist the Center for Neural Regulation, explain how respiratory rhythm is generated, explain how respiratory rhythm which is generated is regulated by various non-chemical efferents, and explain the role of each center and understand the effect of its lesions, enlist that and describe different chemoreceptors, explain the role played by this chemoreceptor in respiratory pattern of normal breathing, and describe the normal and abnormal breathing patterns. Now moving on to the topic proper. Normal breathing, that is breathe in and breathe out, is an involuntary process with a voluntary control. The rhythm of breathing is set by a group of neurons present in the brainstem that innervate the respiratory muscles, and this rhythm is regulated to overcome the changes in chemicals like partial pressure of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and H plus ion concentration in the arterial blood. And this chemical control of breathing is supplemented by several non-chemical influences that influence the brainstem for regulation of breathing. So the regulation of respiration can be subdivided into neural regulation that sets the pace of breathing and chemical regulation that overcomes the alterations in partial pressure of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and H plus ion concentration. Now let us see how this pattern of breathing is generated by the neural component of our brain. The neural regulating system of respiration is present in respiratory centers in brainstem, that is mainly in medulla. These respiratory centers which generate the rhythm are influenced by the afferents coming from pons. As you can see here in this diagram, the afferents come from pons, number one, number two, and various non-chemical afferents coming from other parts of the body, that is from the stretch receptors present in the chest wall and the lungs, J receptors, baroreceptors, and the receptors present in the muscles and the joint, which are also called as proprioceptors. These influence the pattern of respiration generated in the neurons present in the medulla. Above this, there is also voluntary control by higher centers of neocortex, which regulate the pattern of breathing. Respiratory center in medulla consists of dorsal respiratory group of neurons, ventral respiratory group of neurons, and pre-Bonzinger complex. To enumerate initially, I would like to describe that the neurons which are active during inspiration are called as inspiratory neurons, and the neurons which are active during expiration are called as expiratory neurons. Now let us move on to the dorsal respiratory group of neurons present in the medulla oblongata. These are the neurons which are present in the vicinity of nucleus tractus solitarius. Here you can see this is the medulla. Upper part is the pons. Above this part is the pontine part of the brainstem, and this is the medulla, from where a lot of cranial nerves are arising. And this is the area of fourth ventricle, near the fourth ventricle, where nucleus tractus solitarius is present on either sides. And near the vicinity of this nucleus tractus solitarius, on bilateral side of brainstem, are the dorsal respiratory group of neurons present. Again, this dorsal respiratory group of neurons contains three types of neurons. Number one, it is inspiratory neuron, which is also called as eye neuron. Then second one is inspiratory off switch neuron and integrator neuron. This inspiratory neuron or eye neuron, which originates from dorsal respiratory group, here you can see this medial part is a dorsal respiratory group of neurons. These form the upper motor neuron of the respiratory muscles or inspiratory muscles to be specific, which are innervated by phrenic nerve. What are the inspiratory muscles? The diaphragm and the inspiratory intercostal muscles. That is external intercostal muscle. These muscles are innervated by phrenic nerve and spinal nerves, and these nerves have upper motor neurons which originate from dorsal respiratory group of neurons, which are mainly the eye neuron. These eye neurons, they generate the inspiratory uh, burst of signals in a ramp-like manner. What do you mean by this inspiratory ramp signal? It means that the signal generated or burst of impulses which are generated from eye neurons are initially weak and they steadily increase in a ramp-like manner. As you can see here in this diagram, the burst of signals from the eye neurons are steadily increasing over a period of time. That is for about 2 seconds. Then they abruptly cease for about 3 seconds. What is the importance of this ramp-like signal? It helps in slow increase, slow and steady increase in lung volume during inspiration rather than abrupt distension. So it prevents the abrupt distension. This ramp-like signal, which is generated from the inspiratory neurons or eye neurons, helps in steady increase in lung volumes. Lung volume. Next, as you can see here, there is inspiration which is occurring for 2 seconds, which coincides with the ramp of the signal, and abrupt stoppage of the signal which occurs for 3 seconds, where the inspiratory activation of inspiratory muscles halts, so that there is passive recoil of the chest wall and the lung, which leads to expiration. Moving on to the other type of neurons present in the dorsal respiratory group of neuron, that is inspiratory off switch neuron. These neurons, they mainly play an important role in switching off. Yes, these inspiratory off switch neurons mainly turn off or terminate the activity of eye neurons. Terminate the activity of eye neurons. Thus, the turning off of the eye neurons activity ceases the inspiratory ramp and causes turning off of excitation of inspiratory muscles. That's how the chest wall and the lungs passively relax, causing a passive expiration of air. This is how breathing occurs. That is inspiration powered by the respiratory ramp generated from the eye neurons, and passive expiration due to stoppage of inspiratory ramp by the inspiratory off switch neurons. Next neurons are the integrator neurons. These integrator neurons, they integrate the activity of eye neurons and off switch neurons. They are present near the eye neurons. They are present very near the eye neurons. And when eye neurons are active, simultaneously they stimulate this integrator neuron, which causes activation of inspiratory off switch neuron. Therefore eye neurons, if you see in this circuit, here I have depicted the integrator neurons which are activated by eye neurons. When these eye neurons activate integrator neuron, it stimulates the inspiratory off switch neuron, which turns off the inspiratory ramp generated by eye neurons. So eye neurons indirectly, therefore the eye neurons trigger inspiratory off switch neurons indirectly via stimulating the integrator neurons, thereby terminating its own discharge. This forms the basic circuitry of automatic respiratory rhythm generation. Now this integrator neuron receives both excitatory inputs and inhibitory inputs. As I was stating earlier, there are non-chemical influences which influence the respiratory pattern generator. Now these influences and afferents, they integrate on integrator neurons. which receives both excitatory and inhibitory influences. The excitatory influences come from cerebral cortex, pneumotaxic center, and vagus. From the vagus, number one, from the vagus, number two, from the cerebral cortex, and number three, a pneumotaxic center, which is present in pons. This vagal afferents mainly play a very crucial role in preventing overinflation of the lungs and the chest wall during inspiration. The cortical and pneumotaxic influences will be discussed later. The inhibitory influences, what it receives, are the influences from the apneustic center present in the pons. Now moving on, ventral respiratory group of neurons. These are located ventral to and lateral to dorsal respiratory group of neurons in the medulla, as you can see here. And these group of neurons, they extend all the way from pons to the lower part of medulla oblongata up to almost spinal cord. They mainly innervate, as you can see in this diagram. This is the ventral respiratory group of neurons which are innervating the spinal nerves, which go to expiratory intercostal muscles and abdominal muscles. Let me remind you, the abdominal muscles and expiratory intercostal muscles are the accessory muscles of expiration, and hence it is postulated that, and it is also observed and postulated that, these ventral respiratory group of neurons mainly function during forced breathing, and they are quiescent or not so active during normal breathing. Now coming to pre-Bodzinger complex. This pre-Bodzinger complex is the area or a group of neurons which is present between two other nuclei. One is nucleus ambiguous, which we can be seen here in the medulla, and another nuclei, that is lateral reticular nucleus. It is said to be the pacemaker for normal respiratory breathing, which is present in the brainstem. Now moving on to the pontine centers. These pontine center is said to only modulate the respiratory output, but they are no way essential for respiratory output. Why? We would understand by studying the different lesions of brainstem. What happens to the pattern of respiration when there are lesions to brainstem? At that point, we would understand what is the crucial role played by pontine respiratory centers. It is said that they only modulate the respiratory output, but they are no way essential for the respiratory output. And there are basically two pontine respiratory centers. One is apneustic center and another one is pneumotaxic center. First and foremost, the apneustic center. Apneusis means deep breathing. Deep prolonged inspiration is called as apneusis. The type of neurons found in apneustic center are mainly inhibitory, which are located in the lower pons bilaterally. As you can see here, this is the lower, this is the medulla where DRG and VRG are present, and this is the pons. And in the pons, in the lower part of the pons, apneustic center is present bilaterally. The important role played by apneustic center is that it has inhibitory influence on integrator neuron. Now, when integrator neuron is inhibited, the inhibition on off switch neuron, inspiratory off switch neuron, is inhibited. So inhibition of off switch neuron, when it is inhibited, it finally leads to increase in inspiratory ramp generated from inspiratory neurons, which would increase in depth and duration of inspiration. But this apneustic center is inhibited by vagus and pneumotaxic center. Normally, in normal condition, apneustic center is always under the inhibitory influence of vagus and pneumotaxic center. That is the reason why we have normal depth of inspiration. But once this inhibitory influence of vagus and pneumotaxic center is gone, the person lands in deep prolonged inspiratory phase, which is called as apneusis. Next is the pneumotaxic center, which is present bilaterally in the upper part of the pons. Main role played by pneumotaxic center is to reduce the amount of inspiration. How it does? It does by having excitatory influence on integrator neurons. Let me remind you, when integrator neurons are activated, they activate inspiratory off switch neuron, which turns off the inspiratory ramp signal. When the inspiratory ramp signal is turned off, the inspiration is stopped. So in other words, pneumotaxic center, by stimulating integrator neurons of a dorsal respiratory group of neurons, it reduces the duration and depth of inspiration. It also plays an important role in having inhibitory influence on apneustic center. That is why from these points, it an observation, it could be understood that pontine centers mainly influence or modulate the respiratory output, but they are no way essential for the generation of respiratory output. These are the effects of lesions in the brainstem on respiration. On right hand side of the diagram, you can see the brainstem with the different structures of respiratory centers of pons and medulla, and on this side of the diagram you can see what is the effect on depth and rate of respiration. Here also there are two patterns. One pattern which is seen when the vagi are intact, and one pattern of respiration when vagi are cut. So let us see what happens when the brainstem is cut completely below the medulla, or when the lesion is there below the medulla. The respiration ceases, whether vagi are intact or vagi are cut. But when the lesion is there uh, at the junction of medulla and pons below apneustic center, we can see that when the vagi are intact, depth of inspiration is depth of respiration is more when compared with when the vagi are cut, which describes that when vagi are intact, they inhibit the depth of respiration. When vagi are cut, the depth of respiration inspiration is reduced, which has inhibitory influence on apneustic center, which is present just above the junction of pons and medulla. We can also see that the pattern of respiration is irregular when the lesion is there at the junction of pons and medulla. When the lesion is at point B, that is in the higher part of the pons, keeping the pneumotaxic center intact, and only the apneustic center is eliminated, we can see that the depth of inspiration has increased. When vagi also cut, the person lands in a prolonged state of inspiration, which is called as apneusis. When the lesion is at point A, that is just above the pneumotaxic center, we can see that when the vagi are intact, depth of inspiration and rate of respiration are normal. But when the vagi are cut, we can see that the depth of inspiration has increased. Now from this we can understand that vagi mainly influence the depth of respiration, which brings the efferents from stretch receptors present in the lung and the chest wall. By doing so, it limits the depth of respiration. So when the vagi are cut, the depth of respiration increases. This is what we can learn from the lesions of brainstem, which we commonly find in our day-to-day clinical practice. And we see the patients who are suffering from strokes of brainstem. These are the patterns of breathing what we see in them. Now moving on to voluntary control of respiration. Voluntary control of respiration is done by pathways from neocortex that bypass medullary respiratory center and project directly to the spinal respiratory neurons. This is very essential for control of breathing during activities like talking, as what I am doing now, singing, swimming, and swallowing. Now coming to another important aspect of this neural regulation, and which we see commonly, not so frequently, but we see such cases in our clinical practice in emergencies. that is Ondine's curse. Now, Ondine's curse is a clinical condition due to compression of medulla or due to bulbar poliomyelitis, which basically causes loss of automatic control of respiration. As I have said earlier, neural regulation is done by automatic control and voluntary control. Now, in Ondine's curse situation, what happens is there is automatic control of respiration is lost. So the person, if he has to survive, he has he can do breathing only by voluntary regulation of breathing all the time throughout his survival. Now, as the automatic and voluntary control are separate, the above clinical condition causes the disruption of automatic control without the loss of voluntary control. The lesion is there only in the medulla, but we know that voluntary control, voluntary impulses, they bypass medulla and reach the respiratory spinal neurons independently and separately. Uh, so if the lesion is there in the medulla, what happens is only automatic control of respiration is lost, but the voluntary control is kept intact. So what happens to the patient? The patient can breathe only by voluntary regulation of respiration. That is, if the patient has to survive, he or she has to breathe voluntarily all the time to survive. So this is about Ondine's curse. Ondine's curse is basically based on a German legend, based on a fairy tale about Ondine. Ondine was a mermaid who was deceived by a mortal a man from Earth, and that's why the king of the mermaids had cursed the mortal male, who was also the father of Ondine the mermaid, that he would lose his automatic control of his breathing. So the person who suffered that Ondine's curse had to breathe throughout his life, and he died due to the exhaustion of voluntary breathing. So that is what happens in the patient who are suffering with the Ondine's curse, which is due to the lesion of bulbar poliomyelitis or compression of brainstem. Coming to non-chemical afferents to the respiratory brainstem center. Number one is the vagal afferents, which come from the airway and the lungs. You can see here the stretch receptors, mainly the stretch receptors, which give the information about to what extent the lungs and the chest wall is stretching during inspiration, are carried by the vagi to the respiratory brainstem center, which are mainly inhibitory, which inhibit or limit the excessive expansion during in inspiratory phase of respiration. Vagi also carry the afferents for Herring-Brewer inflation reflex, in which overinflation of the lungs beyond 800 ml, this Herring-Brewer inflation reflex is activated, and the afferents are carried by vagus nerve to the brainstem nuclei, from where the further inspiratory phase or inspiratory ramp is inhibited and further expansion of lungs is halted. That is about Herring-Brewer inflation reflex. This is a very protective reflex which prevents the chest wall and lungs from overinflation. There is also Herring-Brewer deflation reflex, which is activated when the lungs are deflated beyond certain limits. Again, the afferents are carried by the vagi, and the efferent impulse is regulates the over deflation and prevents the over deflation of the lungs and the chest wall. Next is the J receptor reflex. J receptors are the naked nerve endings of basically type C fibers and naked nerve endings of vagal afferents, which are present around the pulmonary capillaries. They are activated when there is interstitial edema in the pulmonary circulation, and also by toxins like capsaicin. What happens basically is initially there is What happens when J receptors are activated is the afferents are carried by vagus nerve, and the response seen is apnea followed by rapid breathing, bradycardia, and hypotension. It is again a protective reflex which protects against interstitial edema due to over exercise uh, occurring in high altitude places. Other efferents which come to the respiratory center are from the pons, hypothalamus, and limbic system. They mainly bring the afferents related to emotions like pain, emotions, and rise in temperature. The temperature receptors, the thermoreceptors, also send afferents to brainstem nuclei. As we can see, when the temperature rises, the respiratory rate increases, so that there is loss of heat from the body. That is one of the ways how the heat is lost through rapid breathing, which can be seen in panting, seen in the dogs. So similarly, the afferents which come from pons and hypothalamic limbic system are the afferents which influence the respiratory center of brainstem in response to emotions. Like when person is angry or in rage, the respiratory rate changes. It might increase, the depth increases, and when person is emotionally upset, obviously there is change in respiratory rhythm. This change in rhythm is due to the afferents coming from the limbic system to the respiratory brainstem center respiratory brainstem center. Next are the afferents coming from proprioceptors. When proprioceptors also are the receptors which convey the information regarding active and passive movements of joints. Now, this active and passive movements of joint stimulate the respiration, presumably, presumably, presumably because of impulses. Sorry for that. Presumably because of the impulses in the afferent pathways from proprioceptors in the muscles, tendons, and joints. The effect of the efferents coming from proprioceptors to the brainstem center and finally increasing the ventilation would help in increase the ventilation with the exercise. So when the person is doing strenuous exercise, the muscles and the limbs move, they send the afferent impulses to the brainstem, which would increase the ventilation with the exercise. That's how the afferents coming from proprioceptor help in improving the ventilation with the exercise and affect the basic respiratory rhythm. Other important reflexes that would influence the respiratory breathing pattern are deglutition reflex, sneezing, and cough. Now, during deglutition, that is swallowing of food, in the pharyngeal phase of swallowing of the food, there is a temporary cessation of respiration, which is called as deglutition apnea. This is protective apnea, so that when the food is being swallowed, the apnea would prevent the food from entering the respiratory tract. So this apnea is again caused by the deglutition reflex, which sends the afferents to respiratory center for temporary cessation of the respiration, leading to deglutition apnea. Next is sneezing and cough reflex. Cough reflex and sneezing reflex are both are protective reflexes. Cough reflex is activated when the toxic or an irritant enters the respiratory tract, and irritant receptors present in pharynx, larynx, and trachea and bronchi are activated. Now, cough basically consists of deep inspiration followed by a forceful expiration with closed glottis. So that when forceful expiration is occurring with closed glottis, the air is blown out. The air is blown out with high velocity, so that whatever irritant is there, it is expelled out from the respiratory tract. Next is the sneezing reflex. Now, the sneezing reflex is again activated by irritant receptors present in the nasal mucosa. And this also, there is deep inspiration followed by forceful expiration, but with open glottis. When the forceful expiration is done, high velocity of air flows out of the nose, blowing out and expelling the irritant present in the upper respiratory tract. Now coming to another aspect of regulation of respiration, that is chemical regulation, which mainly regulates the respiration to overcome the changes or alterations in the chemicals present in the arterial blood, that is arterial partial pressure of oxygen, carbon dioxide and H plus ion concentration. Now, we know that respiratory minute volume is proportional to metabolic rate, and the link between this metabolism in respiration is amount of carbon dioxide produced during metabolism. So the chemical regulatory mechanism adjusts the ventilation, that is breathing in breathing out pattern in such a way that alveolar partial pressure of carbon dioxide is held constant. The effect of excess H plus ion concentration in blood are combated, and the partial pressure of oxygen is raised when it falls to potentially dangerous levels. Now, how these parameters are sensed? These parameters are sensed by two sets of chemoreceptors, that is peripheral chemoreceptors and central chemoreceptors. The response to hypoxia is mediated mainly by peripheral chemoreceptors, whereas the response to hypercapnia and acidemia is mainly mediated by central chemoreceptors and partly by peripheral chemoreceptors. So that is the basics of chemical regulation of respiration. Now let us see what are the peripheral chemoreceptors. Peripheral chemoreceptors are the carotid body and the aortic body, which are seen at the site of bifurcation of uh, carotid artery. We see here carotid body, and on the arch of aorta we see the aortic body. Each of the carotid body consists of an encapsulated structure which contains two types of cells present in the fenestrated sinusoidal capillaries. Here you can see this is a capsule. These are the carotid bodies present at the bifurcation of carotid artery, which is an encapsulated structure. In this encapsulated structure, you can see type 1 and type 2 glomerulus cells. Type 1 cells are also called as glomerulus cells. Type 2 cells are called as sustentacular cells, which are basically modified glial cells. Type 1 cells are uh, similar to adrenal enterochromaffin like cells, adrenal chromaffin like cells, which are present uh, in the vicinity of sinusoidal capillaries. These are the sinusoidal capillaries. Here you can see several sinusoidal capillaries. Surrounding this type 1 glomerulus cells are cup-like nerve endings, which are the afferents of either 9th cranial nerve or 10th cranial nerve. From carotid bodies, the afferent are carried by the glossopharyngeal nerve, and from aortic body, the afferents are carried by vagus nerve. You can see here the afferents are carried by vagus nerve from aortic bodies, whereas from the carotid body, the afferents are carried by glossopharyngeal nerve to respiratory center in the brainstem. Basically, they respond to hypoxia. How they respond? Let us see. The type 1 cells or glomerulus cells have oxygen sensitive potassium channels. Here you can see they have oxygen sensitive potassium channel. Whenever there is a fall in partial pressure of oxygen in the arteries, these potassium channels they close. When they close, lot of potassium accumulates inside the cell, leading to depolarization of the cell. When the cell depolarizes, voltage gated calcium channels open. When this voltage gated calcium channel open, the calcium enters the cell and causes degranulation of the catecholamines containing granules. When these catecholamines are released, as I have stated earlier, the nerve endings of afferents, that is the 9th cranial nerve or 10th cranial nerve, are very close. When the degranulation occurs, these neurotransmitters bind with the afferent nerve endings and generate a impulse which causes the change in ventilation. So whenever there is low oxygen levels falling below 60 millimeters of mercury, the partial pressure of oxygen when it falls below 60 millimeters of mercury, the afferent nerves are activated, which causes increase in rate of ventilation, so that oxygen levels are brought back to normal. here, which can be seen in this flow chart. Whenever there is a reduction in inspired air, what happens? Peripheral chemoreceptors firing level increases. This causes contraction in respiratory muscles, which increases the ventilation to bring back and return the alveolar and arterial partial pressure of oxygen to normal level. Now moving on to the central chemoreceptors. As the name suggests, these are the chemoreceptors which are present in the brain or central nervous system. They are present bilaterally in the medulla oblongata, which are called as medullary chemoreceptors. Additionally, chemoreceptors are also located in the vicinity of nucleus tractus solitarius, locus coeruleus, and hypothalamus. So that is about the location of chemoreceptors. Now, what is the mechanism which influences and activates these chemoreceptors is, now we know that central chemoreceptors are mainly activated and they are sensitive to H plus ion concentration. But the problem here is H plus ions cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. Yes, the H plus ions cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. Blood-brain barrier is impermeable to ions. So what happens? What happens? These central chemoreceptors are the magnitude of stimulation of these central chemoreceptors is indirectly influenced by the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. That's why it is said that magnitude of stimulation of central chemoreceptors is directly proportional to local H plus ion concentration, which in turn parallels the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. How it occurs? I will explain. Whatever carbon dioxide is there in the artery, it in the arterial blood, in the cerebral capillaries, it can freely cross the blood brain barrier. As carbon dioxide is a gas, it freely crosses. Now in the cerebrospinal fluid there is a huge amount of carbonic anhydrates, which hydrates this carbon dioxide to carbonic acid, which again dissociates to form H plus ion and uh, um, HCO3 minus ion. Now this H plus ion concentration is directly proportional to concentration of partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the artery. This H plus ion concentration formed here in the vicinity of central chemoreceptor in the cerebrospinal fluid activates the central chemoreceptor, which gives the afferent and a collateral to respiratory control center in the brainstem to increase the ventilation. This is how the increase in partial pressure of carbon dioxide influences indirectly by generating H plus ion concentration in the CSF to increase the ventilation to alter the ventilation to bring back the carbon dioxide level to normal. It is said that 85% of respiratory drive is initiated by central chemoreceptors, whereas only 15% of respiratory drive is initiated by peripheral chemoreceptors. Now let us see what are the ventilatory responses to hypoxia. It is said that when the arterial partial pressure of oxygen falls between 100 to 60, there is not much effect in ventilation, but the ventilation markedly increases when it falls below 60, which activates mainly the peripheral chemoreceptors. And so also we should know that hypoxia makes the individual more sensitive to increase in arterial partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So that is we can make out that a person who is suffering from hypoxia, when there is respiratory failure, which could increase the carbon dioxide level in the arteries, which would lead to more aggressive increase in ventilatory rate. It is because the hypoxia makes the individual more sensitive to increase in arterial partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Now let us see what are the ventilatory response to change in H plus ion concentration. H plus ion concentration increases in conditions like metabolic acidosis, commonly seen in diabetes mellitus. Now this increase in H plus ion concentration in the blood would lead to hyperventilation, decreasing alveolar carbon dioxide, which blows up the carbon dioxide and thus produces a compensatory decrease in H plus ion concentration. Conversely, In metabolic alkalosis, what happens, which could be due to loss of HCl, as in vomiting, there is depression of ventilation. The respiratory rate reduces, which retains the carbon dioxide, increasing the arterial partial pressure of carbon dioxide, and thus raises the H plus ion concentration towards the normal. Now let us see what are the ventilatory responses to carbon dioxide. Whenever there is increase in plasma partial pressure of carbon dioxide, it activates both central and peripheral, mainly central, peripheral chemoreceptors to certain extent. When central chemoreceptors are activated, as I have shown the mechanism earlier, there is increase in ventilation, so that there is more and more washout of carbon dioxide and more entry of oxygen, which brings the alteration in these two gases to normal level. Now, few applied aspects about regulation of respiratory patterns, in which the most important is the abnormal patterns of breathing. Before going to abnormal patterns of breathing, we should understand what is normal pattern of breathing. In normal pattern of breathing, you can see there is slow and steady rise in the volume of lungs, and there is abrupt cessation of inspiration, during which there is passive recoil of respiratory muscles, chest wall and the lungs, which leads to passive expiration of air from the lungs. This is normal pattern of breathing, which is called as eupnea. One abnormality seen in the eupnea starting with is a sigh. A sigh is a condition in which there is larger than normal breaths that occur automatically at regular intervals in normal subjects. A type of sigh is a yawn, which is exaggerated sigh. Another abnormal pattern of respiration is hyperventilation, in which there is increase in frequency and depth of respiration. Tachypnea is a condition in which there is increase in respiratory rate only. A type of breathing pattern called as Kussmaul breathing refers to extremely deep, rapid breathing seen in metabolic acidosis. Example is diabetic ketoacidosis. Next type of respiratory breathing pattern is Kinds-Stokes respiration, in which there are cycles of gradual increase in tidal volume and gradual decrease in tidal volume, followed by a period of apnea. Apnea means no breathing or no respiration. Another abnormal pattern of respiration is gasping type, in which there is maximal brief inspiratory effort separated by long periods of expiration, which is seen in terminally ill patients who are having brainstem lesion or who are suffering with severe anoxia. Another type of breathing is apneusis. In apneusis, the breathing pattern consists of prolonged inspiration followed by a brief period of expiration. Vagal breathing consists of slow, deep inspiration, which is caused due to the lesions in vagal afferents reaching the brainstem. Ataxic breathing is a type of breathing in which there are irregular inspirations followed by long periods of apnea. One of the pattern of ataxic breathing is Biot's breathing, which is seen in patients who are suffering with meningitis. That's all about the abnormal patterns of respiration. To summarize the topic of regulation of respiration, we now know that there is a central pattern generator of pattern of breathing in medulla, which is influenced by the afferents coming from the pontine centers, that is pneumotaxic center and apneustic center, and the vagal efferents coming from the chest wall, lungs, and various other non-chemical receptors present in the body. And there is chemical regulatory center present in the medulla, which changes or alters the pattern of breathing to restore the chemical composition of blood, mainly the partial pressure of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and H+ion concentration. That's all. If you have got any doubts, please put it in the comment section and please try to solve the assignment given to you. Thank you.